Hi everyone, this is team number 4 and we are gonna talk about manifestations of emotions in pandemic confinement. Our team is conformed by Aviles Montes Helena Lynn, Cruz Luna Citlali Lisette, González Tlatelpa Daniela Abigail, Maravilla Pérez Abigail, Pérez Rojas Brenda Paola, and Sánchez Monterrosa Samaria Valeria. I'm gonna talk about chapter 1, the abstract. The aim of this research is to know the importance of mental health populations during the pandemic and how it was extremely affected and how to cope with the different mood swings among them that people were so concerned about their physical health and they forgot about their mental health. Much of the population that was affected by this confinement were adolescents, who were surveyed in this project to analyze the changes that occurred in their social environment. Many of those affected have spoken in the time with family members to be able to go to a specialist, while other part prefers to keep their feelings themselves and not to seek help from a professional. Problem statement. At the onset of the 2020 pandemic, the population that mandatorily had to be in 2-year confinement had their mental health affected, with the greatest burden on adolescents aged 15 to 18 years. Justification. The enclosure has become something habitual because of the lockdown occasioned of the pandemic that we are living. Lending young people to change their habitual activities, it's also affected on their health. The purpose of this investigation is focused on knowing certain emotional manifestations during confinement in order to know the causes and how it changes their lifestyle. All this with a great interest because we are within the school-age community. Objectives. Analyze the changes that occur in the social environment of teenagers, student sector, due confinement during the COVID-19 pandemic in the city of Puebla. Specific objectives. Investigate the possible effects that confinement due to COVID-19 could cause in teenagers on school age. Number 2. Survey some students to know the effects that were presented in them. Number 3. Analyze how all these effects could be avoided in the event of another public health emergency.
Chapter 2. Theoretical Fragment Work. Introduction. In this investigation, we will talk about the second most serious problem during confinement, people's physical, mental, and emotional health, and the change that they have manifested. Background. Vivanco 2020 claims that alteration or change in sleep mode and appetite are some of the changes that occurred in children and adolescents and may be indicator of psychological problems after confinement, avoiding COVID-19 infections. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. Stanford Children's Health 2021 concludes that people with obsessive-compulsive disorder can become overly obsessed with cleaning and decontaminating themselves and the place where they live. They are people who have excessive fears related to dirt and compulsive wash their hands or other parts of their body.
Stress. The pandemic has become a way of life. Science has created an alteration to the lifestyle before it arrived, offering certain factors with which we live daily, adding that the population as well has suffered some mental problems, as defined by Macias 2020. The stress generated by the demands of this new environment can be called pandemic stress. Being exposed to a constant change of mood to confinement can cause Sequel such is has a irritability, feeling that we find eating and despairing or injured. This can bring certain problems among his social circle, family, and friends. Eating disorders by not having a good interaction with the outside world, we know how to put up with any completion causing us to develop unhealthy habits such as restricting food, binge eating, and purging. People with eating disorders should be trained by a multidisciplinary team specialized in eating disorder, including psychologists, psychiatrists, nutritionists, and physicians. In the present study carried out during the preventing population quarantine without the presence of system overflow capacity national health system, a high presence of anxiety symptoms pointed out the researcher pandemic comparing to pre-pandemic surveys.
Chapter 4 Results. Survey results with graphic and interpretation. In this graphic, we can see that more than a half of the people surveyed are women, and over a quarter of the answers were provided by men. We can notice that less than 10% prefer to avoid the question. These results show that almost all the people surveyed are persons between 14 and 18 years old, and just a few percent are persons between 19 and 22 years old. The survey showed that of the three options given, the highest number is tired, sleepy with 41.9 of selection. The graph showed that 51.6 of the people surveyed have gone out with some frequency, but the other 48.4 prefer to stay and
The graph 1.3. The result of this graph may be alarming in some ways, as it appears that the pandemic has drastically changed the life of 61.3% of response, with the next highest number of response choosing not to answer for a reason they did not to choose to comment, with 32.2% of selection, and finally not all with 6.5% of selection. The results given in graph 1.4 may be where some signs of response develop a serious mental problem during confinement, such as sleeping problems and stress. It is not superfluous to say that during this time in confinement, also develop the difficult management of our emotions, worry, and problems with the food. The graph 1.5. The survey shows that previously a large number of response, 74.2%, were already aware of their mental health, but the other part of the response, 25.2%, weren't, which leads to the conclusion that during the pandemics they were developing them. The graph 1.6. What we can observe here is that the response have knowledge of what age mental problems is, and sometimes what this entails in our daily lives. The problem that has been identified, the most was stress, then inequality between eating problems and insomnia, followed by depression, also with a high number, the anxiety, and last but not least, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Graph 1.7. It can be observed that is a quality of 41.9% of the response have responded in an affirmative way to seek help from a professional, while the other has responded that maybe they will go, and the other remaining percentage with 60.1% responding with a negative way. Graph 1.9. With this graph, we realize that the pandemic clearly changed us, not only physically but also mentally,
It changed our way of seeing life in a good or bad way, and they reflect in the affirmative answer with 90% that it changes and the other 10% responded negatively. Graph 1.10. The results we can see are positive signs, although they have developed sleep problems. The respondents have not prescribed medication to make sleep easier. Since 60% of the answer no, and the other 40% have done so. Finally, there is the conclusion. From the analysis of the results of the survey applied to 31 participants, more than 60% of the participants manifest that the pandemic has affected their daily life and has changed the way they feel. They are emphasizing that almost 75% of the participants say that before pandemic they had already psychological problems. It is important to mention that just 41% of people surveyed has considered attending to a specialist for a diagnosis and for receive help on their mental health. Is in order of the reasons we conclude that the problem study has been effectively answered and all of the objectives have been accomplished.